Welcome to Minds in Motion with Dr. K, where we explore the lives of leaders who are changing the world in this era of modern leadership. I am your host, Dr. K, and today we are joined by a special guest, none other than Debbie Manu. Debbie, welcome. We are so happy to have you as our guest today.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm really happy to be here.
And I'm going to tell you just a little bit about Debbie. There's so much to tell about her, but Debbie is the managing director of Janus North America. She is a highly skilled sales business development professional who built deep client relationship with some of the most iconic American companies. She has been championing EI and sees it as pivotal in the era of modern leadership in the workplace. So please, 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 listening audience, help me welcome Debbie Mono.
Thank you for having me, Anne-Marie. This is great.
So Debbie, I know, as I said, you're the champion of EI. You have been, really digging deep into this for a long time. What is emotional intelligence? There's such a buzz around it, and different ones are saying different things. And I wanted to bring on the SME, the subject matter expert, to share with us what is emotional intelligence and why do you see it as critical for effective leadership?
Yeah. Oh, and thank you. And what a great way to start our conversation. So we can talk about emotional intelligence as really, Dr. K, being a set of skills, right? And this set of skills really helps us to do several things: to perceive how we're feeling and how other people are feeling, to understand what those emotions mean, to be able to reason with, to be able to make decisions. Having our feelings and our emotions and those of others work for us and with us rather than against us, to really utilize what is already part of our beautiful humanity, which are our emotions, but to really utilize them to our advantage and to the advantage of the people we're with. Or in other words, in shorthand, emotional intelligence really helps people to make really productive decisions when we are exposed to negative or unproductive emotions. And we talk about it mostly in the workplace, but we are holistic human beings. And so everything that we talk about today that applies to leadership, we can also directly apply to being better partners, better parents, better siblings, better community members. So it really is this intertwining of professional and personal. And it's a set of skills that all of us can learn and become more effective and more productive in using.
Absolutely. I like the fact that you mentioned it is holistic because again, I think sometimes we relegating it just to the workplace, but as you say, it can be in the school, it could be in relationship, right, with your family. So just want people to know it's not something like, oh, I don't need to be bothered with that. I'm not a leader. Because a lot of times they think you just need to be a leader in order to be emotionally intelligent. So I'm so glad you expound on that it is broader than just for a leader. It's important for a leader, but it can be utilized in a holistic manner. So how can leaders develop and enhance their emotional intelligence? Could you share some thoughts around that?
Yeah, absolutely. And what a wonderful decision should people arise to deciding to do that. What a wonderful thing to do. There are several reasons to do it and some ways to do it. Let me just, if I can, pop in there a couple reasons to do it. We have so much research and so much empirical evidence that leaders in particular who demonstrate higher levels of emotional intelligence drive their teams to be more engaged, to be more creative, to be more innovative. There's this direct connection between the demonstrated levels of emotional intelligence of a leader and it being the strongest driver of engagement. I've been around the block a few times now and worked in this space for 2.5 decades. And I've yet to meet an individual or an organization who isn't trying to elevate the engagement of their organization because we know all the things that come along with that. Well, the beautiful thing about emotional intelligence, it's sort of like this single effort solution that can drive engagement and all of the things that engagement drives. So I think there's really good motivation for people just stepping back and saying, hey, are there one or two things that I could do a little bit differently or a little bit more frequently that would have a much stronger result? And that, of course, gets to your kind of the root of your question into how do we do that? And the very best way, Dr. K, to do that is firstly to measure where we are. You know, if anybody who's listening has had the opportunity to go to a place like the Mall of America, where I, for the first time, had a chance to go last year, it's enormous. And what's the first thing that we did when we walked in the door is we went to go find the directory, because I was looking for the red dot that says you are here so that I could figure out where I wanted to go and how to get there. That's really what an emotional intelligence assessment does. It really can help a leader or anyone, any contributor for that matter, but it really can tell you, hey, here's where I am. Here are the things that my team thinks are really important, because we don't often talk about that. We make some assumptions about what we think our teams want or need. So an assessment gives us the opportunity to find out exactly how important do they think certain leadership behaviors are. And then secondly, how do they see me showing up, right? What I think I'm doing could be really different from what they're observing from me and what they receive from me. So what an assessment does is it makes very objective, hey, here are the things that are going well, let's capitalize on those. Here are a couple things that if we put a little bit of effort into these opportunities for growth and development, we can sort of have you demonstrating this more frequently, which of course drives a much better, more productive result. So the place to always start is with an assessment. The thing that you need behind that assessment then is some good guidance, some discipline, or having someone such as yourself who is a coach and a consultant and a trusted advisor to really be, sort of a peer coach and an accountability partner, because we're all busy and everybody's got 1,000 things to do. So you really want to have somebody who can help guide that path. Like, what am I doing well? What do I want to work on? How am I going to do that? What do I see myself getting? We all need a whiff 'em. What am I going to get if I put some focused effort here? And then having somebody like yourself really guide that process. That by far is the best first place to start.
Wow, I love that. I love that answer. Having that guidance and that discipline, as you say, people fall off, and it's not easy to change behaviors. It's not easy to start and adopt new behaviors and habits. So having that guide or that coach or someone to keep you in alignment with where you want to go as a leader. One of the things is there's so many assessments out there. Now, I being a certified proud Janus practitioner who have really debriefed so many of those assessments. And I know that they are scientifically based. So I know there's so many other assessments. So what do you think, or would you say sets Janus apart, their model apart from others that's out there?
Yeah, there are a couple, I think, big things, and then certainly, as we all say, lots of other things that make that up. But I'll start with this, Dr. K. The first thing is that everything that we are measuring, they are observable behaviors. Every single thing in the Genos assessment is something that can be grown and developed. And so this is really empowering. This is really empowering for the leader who's undergoing an assessment, because there's never a response that says, oh, I can't do anything about that. Yeah, we can. And then it just becomes a matter of, what is it that, if I'm the person being assessed, in my current context, in my leadership role, in what is on my plate and the team I have at the moment, what are the couple things that make the most sense for me? What are the things that can really make a difference? And so that's another thing that's a bit different about Genos, is that we don't pre-prescribe, hey, because you did this, you should do that. This is really centered around the leader. This is gaining some information about how they're showing up. And of course, we know that all of these things can be grown and developed. Yes. The other thing I think that makes Genos different is the notion of this importance scale. Not everything is equally important to everyone. Leaders often learn that there are certain things that are really important to their peer group, but there are a different set of things that are really important to their direct reports. And when armed with that information, we can make some really good decisions about, hey, kind of where's the biggest payoff here?
Mm,
Something's really important to their direct reports, even if they're demonstrating a fair amount, with a little bit of effort, if they demonstrated it more frequently, kind of like meeting that expectation, that's where we get into effectiveness. When we have expectation and demonstration really aligned, this is when leaders have an opportunity to shine. And as we know, leaders shine through their teams. And so at the heart of it all in leadership is really, can leaders show up in the workplace in a way that inspires their teams to bring the best versions of themselves willingly, freely, creatively, innovatively, excitedly into the workplace every day. We can't just tell people to do that. That's fostered and that's nurtured. And
mm,
so when a leader picks a couple things to do a little bit differently, and that becomes more productive, and that drives that connection and that communication and that collaboration with their teams, and then their teams are feeling valued and heard, and now they're doing better work and they're coming in with better ideas and they're sharing ideas with other folks. And this is really when you kind of get that horsepower kind of going. I'm sorry, you can tell I get really excited about that.
I love it. And
So
I'm excited
yeah,
there myself because you talk about that expectation and demonstration aligning, right? And then you talk about, feeling appreciated and heard. And we know that whole psychological safety is also being aligned with the emotional intelligence. So
yeah,
as these leaders show up in that way, then they can definitely get their teams to be more engaged because there's such a large number of disengaged employees in the workplace. And it's something leaders, corporations are struggling with. How do we get them engaged? And you just shared a mouthful of some of the ways as they go through these assessments, as they start understanding what their blind spots are and understanding how they're showing up to their peers or their direct reports and the things that they can do differently so that they can become the best version of themselves. So I am truly loving this. Recent research I have seen and studies are showing companies value EQ over IQ. Not saying that IQ should go away,
right.
but do you see that same type of situation happening around you? Are you hearing more of that, where companies are definitely valuing EQ now over IQ? What are your thoughts
Yes.
around that?
Indeed, we are, Dr. Kate. And there's some interesting things driving that, right? I think if all of us thought back or asked the hypothetical question, hey, if you go back 100 years and you had an opportunity to work for someone or with someone who really made you feel valued and appreciated and included and heard and competent and really nurtured and mentored your career, or to work for someone who is kind of awful, it's a bit rhetorical, right? We know who we would rather have worked for 100 years ago. I think if you ask that question 100 years from now, you're going to get the same answer as you get today. Of course, we all, I hope, if you take just a quick pause and you think about the very best person that you ever had a chance to work for or with, or maybe it was, the Olympics are going on right now and I'm glued to the television. And so you think about the power of these coaches with these tip top athletes. And there's a skill element, obviously, that those athletes have to have, right? This is sort of the IQ question. Like, there's no doubt that in work, we need those skills, just like that athlete needs those skills, those hard skills. What is it that often separates the leaders of the pack from the rest? We hear this language, Dr. K, all the time. It comes out in different vernacular and different phrases, but we hear things like, he's cool as a cucumber. She has ice water in her veins. He's so resilient. He doesn't let his emotions get the best of him. That, in team sports where one team is trash talking the other team, the people who listen to that often make a mistake. And those who have the ability not to listen to it, who are resilient, don't make that mistake. They kind of use it as fuel, right?
Yes.
All of that is sort of the emotional intelligence side. And you see, I think what sometimes we forget, even though we are human, is that our emotions are just inherently a wonderful part of us. They come along for the ride. Depending upon the age of the listeners, I am almost 60. And so when I started working, I was decidedly told things like, Debbie, check your emotions out the door, or this is a business decision. Your emotions have no place in it whatsoever. Well, that's impossible. A gift of humanity is to have our emotions. And most people will say, geez, Debbie, my emotions are in my head and I kind of take my head with me everywhere I go. We can't just set them aside as if we're going to put them in the bin going through the TSA line. They are with us. And so the great thing is we can grow and develop them. We can become more resilient. We can grow and develop empathy, which I hope we talk a little bit more about, because that is framing up to be kind of sort of the superpower stepping into the future of leadership. We can grow those skills so that when you put those things together, when you kind of put an IQ, EQ together, this creates an environment for really masterful working. Now, whether that's as a salesperson, a customer service rep, a physician, a leader in any industry, when we have both IQ and EQ, when we have the yin and the yang of our workplace, it allows us to flourish.
Yes.
It allows the people around us to flourish. And I'll come back because the holistic human being, I'm going to come back to us as humans, because part of your question was about what's happening in the future. And so there's no doubt that you and anyone listening has been reading about artificial intelligence. It will be more developed when you and I conclude our conversation than was when we started our conversation today.
Yes.
Well, as those programs are continuing, as that space is continuing to grow and develop, the more AI progresses, the higher the demand for EI. Right?
I love that.
Programs can do things that human beings can't. They can compress data and calculate faster and make predictions quicker, right? Here's what an AI program cannot do. You cannot get ChatGPT
Emotions.
to motivate, to console, to
Yeah.
celebrate with, to be sorrowful with, to congratulate, to inspire, to empower. Those are very human skills. And the more that AI presses forward, the more those very human skills are in demand at an individual level. So when people want to grow in their careers or grow in their role, and at an organizational level, we are seeing things like Johnny Taylor from SHRM talking about empathy is not a soft skill, it is a business skill.
Wow.
You'll hear people like Josh Bersin say that every organization needs a CEO, a chief empathy officer.
Ooh, I love that one. Chief Empathy Officer. This
Yes.
is so rich, Debbie. I mean, like you are saying so much richness here right now. I'm like jumping out of my seat. Um, wow. Whew. I had to pause. It's so much. It's just so much. Debbie, the thing is that you mentioned, your generation, right? But now we have these Gen Zs and the millennials in the workplace, and what they want is empathetic leaders. They want leaders who are empathetic. They want to know that they're heard, they're seen, this their psychological safety, what type of culture we're dealing with. As you say in the past, it would be check your emotions at your door. I wear my emotions on my sleeve and all that type of stuff. It's wherever you go, there you are. So
Yeah.
being that emotionally intelligent leader and being able to manage that emotion well and that of others is what is of significant importance right now. So it's probably safe to say that EI is no longer optional, neither is it a nice to know, but it's a must have.
Yeah. Yeah. It's no longer a nice to have, a nice to know, right? It is a requirement. I mean, at a minimum, to be demonstrating sort of an average level of emotional intelligence would be like a minimum requirement. And what are the reasons to go from kind of an average level of demonstration to, more than others or significantly more than others? First of all, there's a direct connection between leaders demonstrating emotional intelligence and ROI. Now, this
Mm.
is, we could have a nursery rhyme together, but there's an ROI to EI, and that is that when it's demonstrated more frequently, the people around those leaders, first of all, they themselves are more effective leaders. They're just more effective in their leadership. They get from point A to point B not only quicker, but more efficiently and with more buy-in. See, it's one thing to be told to go from A to B. It's another thing to be communicated with in a way that says to the team, well, I can't wait to be part of that. I can't wait to do the work to get to B because I've been brought along on this journey, right?
Yes.
So leaders are more effective. People in their roles are more effective. Salespeople will sell more and sell more authentically and genuinely with integrity. Customer service, which is such a needed and such a difficult role to fill. I don't know about you, but I can't recall the last time that anybody picked up a customer service line, got to a rep and said, I'm just calling because I love your stuff, right? These are the folks who are constantly in a very emotionally laborious kind of job, working with people who are not having their finest moment at that moment. But they have that moment, and the customer service person has that moment every day, all moments. So people who have upskilled their EI are stronger in those sort of client relationships, those internal and external customer relationships. But here's the other piece, and that is that there's this direct correlation between those who demonstrate more emotionally intelligent behavior and having enhanced well-being.
Mm.
Upskilling, and we're talking in the context of leadership. So as a leader, upskilling your EI has a definite benefit in your day-to-day work for all the things we've been chatting about. And also, it helps people reduce occupational stress, increase their resilience, basically lead happier, healthier, longer lives. And so we're back to the holistic human being, where something that you do to enhance your role or enhance your capacity or develop yourself so that you're developing your team simultaneously helps you as a person with your well-being, and then of course helps all of those relationships with partners and with kids and with parents and with family members, because we don't learn all these skills and then conclude the day and say, oh, I'm just going to leave that at work, right?
Yes.
Again, our emotions are coming along with us. If we can identify them and use them more productively, we have these deeper, richer relationships with the people with whom we work and with the people with whom we've chosen to spend our lives with.
Mm.
That's
I just
powerful.
wanted to circle back on something you said. You talk about that ROI, that return on investment. Some of the leaders who are more that still that command and control, like, that's soft skill. What is that going to do for us? Right. And when
Yeah.
as you so clearly explain what that ROI is for EI, because there's still some people who's like, oh, that's not it, right? Because they haven't gotten it.
Yeah.
But when you get to understand that ROI, I mean, they will realize what a shift it's going to make for their organization and for their employees. Because one of the things that I am seeing a lot with the leaders that I'm coaching is burnout.
Oh, yeah.
And you just mentioned how AI, with the well-being piece attached to it, can help in those areas. So it all aligns, it all comes together. And I just want to segue right into this question: and how can leaders balance that empathy, the empathy when they're making decisions, so that they can ensure that they're both emotionally and intelligently effective in their roles? Because empathy is so huge.
Oh, it's absolutely huge. And we should probably talk a little bit about, what do we mean by empathy? Really, it's that ability to perceive and understand how someone else is feeling, right? Can we understand, can we get to a place where we see what it's like from their perspective? We could also call it perspective taking,
Mhm.
um, from their perspective, and having the ability to just ask ourselves that question when we find ourselves in a situation that maybe is a bit challenging, or somebody isn't coming along for the ride, or they seem to be hesitant. And You know, this is just such a powerful leadership sort of internal question. How do they see it? How are they seeing it? Because listen, you're talking about burnout. People are busier now than they ever have been before. The pace of business is moving at a rate that we've not seen previously. We are in a do more with less kind of work environment. And so often, so many people, leaders especially, find themselves spending their day running from meeting to meeting and don't have time, or it feels like they don't have time when an employee says, I need to talk to you. You know, and often we're like, oh, I can't do that because I've got another meeting to be in. When the reality is, those people who work with and for us, that's the foundation of everything that happens in their department, in their team, in that organization. And
Absolutely.
so, you know, this idea that we're too busy for each other, which the world is busy. This is where developing some of these EI skills come in, because there's some trainings, as you know, that we do that help people to design resilient workdays. What are these tiny little things that you can do that create, you know, great impact? If anyone's not read James Clear's work, Atomic Habits, this is a fabulous read, right? The power of incremental
Highly
gains.
recommended.
One thing, but that you get this big different result. So I'll share something personally for me that happened when I first came around this work. I am notorious for filling my calendar, and I would fill my calendar with a 9 a.m. and a 10 a.m. and an 11 a.m. and a 12 p.m. and just like, ooh, look, it's color coded and look at all of that. And you know, here's what would happen to me. I would be in my 9 a.m. meeting, and it would now be 9:57, and I'm sweating, and my heart's beating a little fast, because what's happening in my head is I only have 3 more minutes, and I have to get out of this meeting, and I have to get into a next meeting. And so what am I not doing? I'm not present for whatever's going on in the last 5 minutes of this wrap up meeting, which is usually when people say, like, okay, here's what we all agreed to do, because I'm distracted and also emotionally concerned. The feeling I have is concern and worry that I've got to get out of this one and get into the next one. And so maybe I get out of there at 9:59 and 58 seconds, and I have just enough time to disconnect from one Zoom and connect into another one. And when I step into that 10 a.m. meeting, I'm not fully present, because my heart is still pounding and I'm still thinking about what I didn't hear at the end of that meeting, and I'm not prepared and relaxed and focused to step into the 10 o'clock meeting. And I would do that to myself over and over again. One of the things that we learn when we talk about emotional intelligence is we are humbled by our humanity, right? We are humbled by things that in neuroscience they would call threat circuitry and reward circuitry.
Yes.
These are not choices that we make. We don't decide to flip a switch from threat to reward, right? This is our brain taking very good care of us. And when we are triggered, right, like my example of now I'm going to be late, I got to get out of this meeting and get into the next one. When your brain goes, uh-oh, it kind of does some things biochemically, right? Your blood starts pumping quicker and it goes to your extremities, and your adrenal glands start scoring adrenaline. And why does that happen? Because that's a human response. Our brain is preparing us to fight or flee. No, we're not fighting anything. We're kind of
Right.
really technically not fleeing anything, but our brain doesn't know any different. And so now I'm stepping into this 10 o'clock meeting and I've got all this adrenaline squirting through my body. And here's the thing. When we are in that threat circuitry, we do not have the capacity to think critically or clearly. We end up being really problem focused and not solution focused. We feel worried and frustrated and stressed. And so that's kind of like having a bandana tied around your brain. You just aren't at your best. So when I first stepped into the world of emotional intelligence and I learned about building a resilient day, I started scheduling a 9 a.m. meeting, and then a 10:15, and then an 11:30. I started giving myself just a 15-minute buffer. Completely life-changing.
Wow.
Utterly, completely life-changing, because it gave me a chance to finish that meeting, take a moment, take my notes, maybe stand up and stretch a little bit. Maybe I needed to go get a glass of water, or I needed to attend to an email, and still have a couple minutes left to center myself, to come and refer to my notes for my next 10-15 meeting now, made a complete difference in how productive I was, and more importantly, how I was received by the people who I was talking with. That's something your listeners can do, like the minute that you disconnect, is do away with the back-to-back meetings and give yourself a little buffer.
Extremely important. Giving yourself that time to reflect, to reset, and show up present.
Yes,
Because that was key. That's what I hear. Oh, my calendar is so full. When do you don't have time for you, and you don't have time for your direct reports. I
that's right.
think you right now, like you never present. And that's that part of that psychological safety too. Like,
Absolutely, because you can be there and not present, right? You can physically be with somebody, but not be with them. Same thing like with the phone. That's another great thing to do. Somebody comes into your office or you're meeting with somebody, put your phone in your desk or turn it upside down, shut down. I shut down my Outlook before you and I popped into this session because that's really distracting for me because I do tend to a lot of people throughout the course of the day. That's part of my role. And so for me to stay focused and not be distracted by that, I just turned it off. So now my full attention is in one spot. See, these sometimes I think when people think about growing emotional intelligence, they think that it's just this massive amount of work. And the reality is, it's really small things that make a big difference. And when you find those, like here's one more. As a leader, you talked about empathy and decision making, which is how we got kind of into this section. And so, again, reflecting back to my early days when I was specifically told not to have my emotions play a part in decision making, this is a travesty. We have a whole competency dedicated to decision making that we call emotional reasoning. And it really says, listen, we have to take into account, and we should, the facts, the figures, the spreadsheets, the scientific data. And also, we have to take into account all the information that we can glean from the information and feelings. How do we feel about the decision? How are people being impacted by the decision? Will they feel about that decision? And when you take them together in equal measure, you can make really great decisions. And by the way, it doesn't mean that the decision changes when you include that information about feelings. Most often it doesn't change. But how it's presented, how it's carried out, the amount of buy-in you get, right? This is taking empathy and applying it to decision making for the best possible outcome. So back to our athletes in the Olympics, if you watch coaches engage with their athletes, they are constantly making decisions. If that athlete doesn't have the superstar performance, that coach, you can bet, is deciding, I've got to share the technical elements that went well, the technical elements that we need to work on before tomorrow's competition, but I have to do that the right way. Does my athlete need me to say anything to them? Does my athlete need me to simply pat them on the back and we'll talk about it later? Does my athlete need to feel corrected, or does my athlete need to feel consoled? Or do I simply just need to be there with them for a moment and we can talk about the technicalities later? That's emotional reasoning. That's what leaders are doing and could be doing with their teams. People on their teams are simply their teammates and their athletes, and they are their coaches. We think nothing, right, of going and developing, like going to take golf lessons. We don't think anything of that. Hey, my golf game isn't great. I'm going to go take a lesson. I'm going to shank the ball and slice the ball, and I'm going to learn where to put it in my stance. And we don't think anything of doing that because we want to get better at the game of golf. But for some reason, we feel like, oh, well, we shouldn't do that with emotional intelligence. Like that's all exactly what it is. Like, hey, if you've golfed and you put the ball in a better position in your stance, it makes a big difference. Listen, you share and consider some of the feelings of your team members in the decisions that you're about to make, and you get their buy-in. That's a skill set that you can develop that can make a complete difference in how that team interacts.
Absolutely. And one of the things I think leaders got to understand, even as part of that whole empathy piece, is that active listening. Because you can be having that conversation, but you on your computer and you look up every now and then. That presence is not there. That active listening is not there. And then that person doesn't even feel valued. And
That's
all
right.
that part of that whole emotional intelligence, and it encompasses all those things. So I want